Okay, great. Well, thanks for the invitation to help inform this discussion on behalf of the squids as well as your local ecology. I'm in the Marine Resources Center at the Marine Biological Laboratory. This is a building dedicated to this sort of research, and we hold dozens of regional species, including squid. Much of our research has been done on squid to help inform fishery decisions, not unlike the ones that are being discussed today. And we've been especially interested in reproduction because this is a short-lived animal, and it's important to bring some scientific facts to help provide what we actually know those squids are doing underwater. Just very briefly about my own credentials. I'm a diving biologist. I'm a field researcher. I do laboratory experiments based on my field work. Germane to this discussion, my colleague and I performed 136 scuba dives on the spawning squids in Nantucket Sound, and we've published an extensive paper on that. And the importance of mentioning that is that we've actually been able to quantify data what the animals are doing on the spawning grounds where all the action is as far as the squids are concerned. And we've repeated these experiments on a comparative basis on very similar, what we call loll-guided squids, are very similar to your local squid. And we've done this in South Africa, Japan, California, and a few other places. So we have a very broad view of the principles of what these animals are doing underwater, how they lay their eggs, how those eggs develop. And these are really critical to the discussion today. We've also published a lot on this. So I'll get right to the point. It's very clear that trolling, or mobile gear in this case, certainly disrupt not only the eggs, but also the mating system of the animals organizing themselves in these very competitive mating arenas to do the spawning. Can you see this image by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have to see the details, but the point is this is a diagram of what's happening down there on the eggs. And you see it's kind of like a busy airport with squids circling around in the periphery and then eventually pairing up and going down and laying eggs. My point is that it's a very complex system. And there's a lot of intricate behavior going on. There are pheromones, i.e. hormones, that influence a lot of the behavior. And we've studied all this in great detail, but the culmination of this is the animal is actually laying the eggs. And I want to make a strong point that all of the animals, all of the squids of this group called loll-guided squids, the female embeds the eggs into the substrate, into the sandy substrate, and there is a glue on those eggs which hardens in about 5 minutes. So the female tucks those eggs into the sand, the glue hardens, and the eggs go through their whole developmental process attached to the bottom. And this is critically important because the development of these eggs is somewhat delicate, and the eggs need to be attached to the bottom to go through the normal process of hatching out and being viable eggs. And so the key point here is that physical disturbance of those egg cases from a trawl or from a storm with a lot of surge and it displaces some eggs. An earlier speaker noted that sometimes the eggs are washed up on the beach. That's from heavy storm surge and shallow water. Those eggs, none of those hatchlings will survive. Here is sort of the key image. I see what you see as a tiny squid, and that is a squid baby that's about to hatch out of the eggs. We've made this drawing from a squid that is, it says stage 25. There are 28 developmental stages the squids go through to hatch. And I draw your attention to the yellow bits here. And that yellow bit there, against the arms, is an exterior yolk sac that the animal's been sucking on to develop for about 20 or 30 days. And then down here is an internal yolk sac that they will survive on for maybe the next week after they hatch out. And my point is that if the animal is disturbed, it's very sensitive. It will hatch out of the egg with that external yolk sac. But this is absolute death to a squid because the stomach cannot develop until all of that yolk is absorbed properly and their stomach develops. And if they hatch out before that, as if being trawled up or disturbed in the laboratory, and we've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, those babies will not survive. They'll be dead within 2 to 5 days. So this is not my opinion, this is factual information, and we know that because the embryology courses and the physiology courses use these eggs for study every summer, and every time they disturb the eggs in the late stages, they get premature hatching, and those hatchlings do survive. So I just want to kind of finalize and point out that those eggs are embedded in a jelly matrix. A lot of you know what the squid eggs look like, especially the fishermen. That jelly matrix that holds the 100 or 200 little egg babies together is very important. If that gets broken up or torn up in any way, then local bacteria and other little protozoans, these little microscopic things, can get through the jelly and deteriorate it, and that will also lead to improper hatching. So I just want to finalize and point out that these squids are very fast growing. They only live about a year or much less than that, and so the annual turnover of the population is very important. Therefore, having all these squids move inshore to lay their eggs near shore. That's where the abundant food source is for the young that hatch out. Then they migrate offshore, they come back in. On an annual population, really must protect the spawning grounds so that enough animals reproduce in a normal manner so that gene flow through the system is good to get your best animals for next year's squid harvest. So I will finalize and just say that the actual experiments to prove that a trawled up egg does not develop properly have not been done, but I will point out that because so many biologists, ourselves included, have worked on these animals so many times, we haven't done that experiment because we pretty much know what the answer is. However, those experiments could be done if you need that kind of proof to demonstrate to the fishery managers and to the fishermen and to the community that disruption is really fatal, then those experiments could be done. So thank you very much. That's the main thing I wanted to bring to the meeting today.